This video is the first functions video, and it is based on domain, codomain and range, understanding what each of those terms are and making sure you're okay with what a function is. So the definition of a function, and the one that you can see the whole time, is it's a rule that produces one and only one output for each input. Now that might be a bit confusing, but once we do a few examples, I'm hoping that it will make much more sense. Functions, you've probably heard of them described as can be like number machines. So you basically have one number to start with, you pop it into this machine and you'll get another number out. So if we think of functions as machines, then something is put into the machine, something happens in the machine, and then something comes out of the machine. And that's probably something you've seen in the junior cycle exam. So lowercase letters are always kind of used to kind of notate functions. So you'd see things like F, G, or H. I suppose the best example I can think of as a function that you would see the whole time would be your television remote. So when they're in the factory and they're making the TV remote, they program it so that, for example, channel 103 is Virgin Media, channel 101. So when you use your remote, you type in on your remote 101 to get to RT1, and each time you type that in and you kind of have it towards the TV, it will always end up on RT1. Similarly, if you do 103, it's always going to end up on Virgin Media. Now, if you don't have Sky, I'm not much used to, because I have Sky and I can't think of any other one. But if you think of your remote, the best way is whenever you type in a channel, for example, 365 is a music station channel, 501 is Sky News, 401 is Sky Sports. Every time you type that in, you're going to get to the channel you want. So a function is you put something in. So I've typed into the remote 101 and I get a unique output into it. So if I type in 101, there's not two possibilities, there's only one possibility, and that one possibility for 101 is RTE1, the possibility for 501 is Sky News, and so on. So we have one input, so for example 101, and only one output, so which is RTE1. If we had two outputs, it wouldn't be a function. So function is something that has one input, gives one output. Now of course sometimes two inputs can give the same output, but don't get too bogged down about that yet. We'll see examples of that later on. But the key thing is that one input can only produce one output. So one input can't have two outputs. One input cannot have two outputs. That's the key thing to take away from this video. So the best way to look at it is if you think of it in English to start with. So for example, here we have, if I say pick a number, then add 3, then multiply by 5. So if you start with the input 10, then your output would be 65. If you start with the input 6, your output would be 45. And if you start with the input of 100, your output would be 515. So I'm just going to do another one over here. So if we start with the input of 5, and then we add 3. So 5 plus 3, that's going to give us 8. And then if we go 8 times 5, that's going to give us an answer of 40. Again, just to show you another example, if I choose the number 3, I plus 3 to that, that's going to give us 6, and then we have 6 times 5, which will give us the answer of 30. So there's special names for what can go in and what can come out of a function. So what can come into a function, or what we allow to go into a function, is what we call the domain. What may possibly come out of a function is the codomain, and what actually comes out of a function is the range. So if you think of the example here at the bottom of the page, I have multiply by 4 and subtract 1. So this here is a function, and if I tell you that the domain is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I ask you to find the range, what would that be? So if you think of the function, the domain is what can go in, the codomain is what could come out. So for this, any number could come out. Depending on what number we put in, we could get any number. So the codomain is any number. And the range, then the range is what actually comes out. So we need to figure out what happens when we put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 into this function. So for this one, for example, we take 1, we multiply it by 4, so it's going to be 4, and we take 1, we're going to get 3. So when we put in 1, we're going to get out 3. We can do the same now with 2. So if we put in 2, so 2 by 4 is going to give us 8. Take 1 is going to be 7. 3 multiplied by 4 is going to be 12. Take 1 is 11. 4 multiplied by 4 is 16. Take 1 is 15. 5 by 4 is going to give us 20. Take 1 is 19. And then 6 by 4 is going to be 24. Take 1 will give us 23. So then for this example, the range, or what comes out of this function, is 3, 7, 11, 15, 19, and 23. So then if we look at a number machine, like in question 1.1 here. So here's a number machine. For the input, you add 5, multiply by 4, and you get your output. So find the output when the input is 10. So I'm going to do that one up here. So we have the input. So we're going to add 5. So 10 plus 5 gives us 15. And then it's going to be 15 multiplied by 4, which is going to give us an answer of 60. Now, then sometimes you can be asked to work backwards. And we have here that work out the input when the output is 28. So for this one, we're working backwards. So it's 28 divided by 4, which is going to give us an answer of 7. And then we have 7 take 5, which is going to give us an answer of 2. Now again, the third one is very similar. So it's telling us to work out the input when the output is 8. So if the output is 8, it's minus 8 divided by 4, which is going to give us minus 2. And then it's minus 2 minus 5, which is going to be minus 7. Okay, so the last section here says, find an expression in terms of x for the output when the input is x. So here we have the last part. So if we input x, we have x plus 5. So that's just going to give us x plus 5. And then we have to multiply that by 4. Now when we have an unknown, or x, and we have to multiply it by something, we always usually put it in a bracket. So then for the next part here, it's going to be 4 times x plus 5. So the output when the input is x is 4 times x plus 5. Now, if you're still finding this a little bit difficult, don't worry too much. The main thing to take away from this is the 3 definitions. So what a domain is, what a codomain is, and what the range is. So bear in mind that the domain is what we put into a function. Codomain is what could come out. And a range is what does come out. And we're going to be looking at that in the next video. So then that's the end for this video. So this is the first video for functions. The next video is going to be building on our knowledge of domain, codomain, and range, and looking at function machines.